How long can a hacker live inside your network before anyone notices? A week? A month? How about 2.5 years? That's not a hypothetical. That's just what happened to Cisco's SD-WAN platform, a CVSS 10.0 perfect score vulnerability that a state-sponsored threat actor has been quietly exploiting since 2023. It took a Five Eyes intelligence operation, all five countries working together, to even discover it was happening. And that's just story number one. Today, we've got not one, but two perfect CVSS 10.0 scores, an AI chatbot that got jailbroken and used to steal 195 million government records, a North Korean hacking group that figured out how to jump across air gap networks using USB drives and a Ruby runtime, and a phishing platform so sophisticated it makes multi factor authentication essentially useless. This is one of those episodes where I genuinely had trouble picking which story to lead with because every single one of them is a pretty big deal. So let's get into it.
Forge OS is online and operational. Welcome, operator.
Alrighty, welcome back to Exploit Brokers by Forgebound Research. This is HN64. I'm Cipherceval, and as always, I'm sharing information and awareness here. Talk to your own security team for anything specific to your environment. If you're new here, this is the show where we break down the biggest cybersecurity stories of the week in a way that's just useful. Whether you're a seasoned analyst or you're just curious about what's happening in the threat landscape, if that sounds like your thing, well, consider subscribing on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. It really does help the show grow. So we've got a packed episode today. Five stories, two of them with perfect CVSS 10.0 scores, multiple nation state actors, and some genuinely novel attack techniques. Let's jump in. Okay, so let's start with the story that had red alerts going off in my head the moment I saw it. On February 25th, Cisco disclosed CVE 2026 20127, a critical authentication bypass vulnerability in the Cisco Catalyst SD WAN controller, which some of you might still know as Cisco SD WAN vManage. And when I say critical, I mean we're talking a perfect CVSS score of 10.0. That is as bad as it gets. To give context for those who might not be familiar, SD-WAN, and that is SD-WAN, or software defined wide area network, is a technology that large organizations use to manage their network connections across multiple locations. Think of it as the control panel for how a company's offices, data centers, and cloud services all talk to each other. If you compromise the SD-WAN controller or the wide area network controller, you're essentially sitting in the brain of the entire network. Now, here's where the story goes from bad to what the heck. This wasn't discovered because Cisco found a bug in their code review. This was discovered by Australia's ASD-ACSC, their signals intelligence agency, essentially, during an active threat hunting session. And the finding triggered what I can only describe as an unprecedented response, a joint advisory from all five members of the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. We're talking Australia, the United States through CISA and NSA, Canada, the UK, and New Zealand, all publishing simultaneously. That doesn't happen for a routine vulnerability. That is like some epic stuff. Now, the reason it doesn't happen for a routine vulnerability is because a threat actor tracked as UAT 8616 has been exploiting this flaw since 2023. Let that sink in. 2+ years of silent access before anyone knew. The attribution assessment puts this at high confidence as a sophisticated state sponsored actor. They've been targeting critical infrastructure, telecommunications, financial services, and government networks globally. Now, technically, this is classified as CWE 287 or improper authentication. An unauthenticated remote attacker can send specially crafted requests that bypass the SD WAN controller's peering authentication entirely. No credentials needed, no user interaction, and it affects every deployment type on premises, cloud, even FedRAMP environments. The vulnerability is configuration independent, meaning there's no setting you could have changed to protect yourself. The attack chain they documented is genuinely sophisticated. The attacker injects a rogue peer into the SD WAN management plane, then uses netconf, that's a network configuration protocol, to enumerate and modify device configurations. And here's the clever part: they deliberately downgrade the software version on compromised devices to exploit an older, known vulnerability, CVE 2022 2775, which is a path traversal bug to gain root access. Then they restore the original version to cover their tracks. That's not script kiddie behavior, that's tradecraft. You know what you're doing. You're not just breaking in, seeing if you can find something, you're covering your tracks. Now, for persistence, they're creating mimic admin accounts, planting SSH keys, enabling permit root login, and modifying startup scripts. And their operational security is meticulous. They clear bash and CLI history, they wipe Elasticsearch indices, and replace log files with 0 to 2 byte dummy files. Interestingly, no lateral movement was observed outside of the SD-WAN infrastructure itself, which suggests this actor was specifically interested in network visibility and control. Now, CISA responded with Emergency Directive 26-03, the first emergency directive of 2026. Yay! Federal agencies had until February 26th to inventory all Cisco SD-WAN deployments and until 5 p.m. Eastern on February 27th to deploy patches. If root compromise was confirmed, CISA's guidelines was to deploy fresh instances from patched images. Don't just patch, you got to rebuild. Now, patches are available across all affected branches: 20.9, 20.12, 20.15, and 20.18. And this is important: there are no workarounds. You cannot mitigate this with a configuration change or with turning something off or whatever. The only path is patching. So, you know what time it is. Update your stuff. Seriously, a patch does you no good if it's not installed. Those patches are out there, and the sooner they're deployed, the better. With that said, we're moving on, but we're staying on the theme of a perfect CVSS score for a moment, because this next story ties in perfectly. Another 10.0, another state sponsored actor, and a brand new lateral movement technique that has never been documented before. It's just one of those days. On February 17th, Google's Mandiant and their Google Threat Intelligence Group, GTIG, published research on CVE 2026 22769, a critical vulnerability in Dell RecoverPoint for virtual machines. RecoverPoint, for context, is Dell's disaster recovery replication tool. It sits in VMware environments and handles the continuous replication of virtual machine data. It's the kind of infrastructure that organizations rely on to recover from worst case scenarios, which makes it a prime target for threat actors who want deep access. And this vulnerability, well, hard coded credentials. CWE 798 for those tracking at home. There are default username and password sitting in a plain text XML configuration file at a known path. It is /home /KOS /Tomcat9 /Tomcat users.xml. And that grants access to Tomcat Manager interface. From there, an attacker uploads a Java web shell and they've got root level command execution. That's a golden goose of hacking, unauthenticated remote code execution from hard coded credentials that should have never existed in the first place. Forget super crazy memory manipulation and buffer overflows and all this jazz. If you got creds, you're in. The threat actor exploiting this is tracked as UNC 6201, assessed by Mandiant as likely PRC Nexus, meaning connected to China's intelligence apparatus. Now, CrowdStrike tracks the same activity as Warp Panda. There are overlaps with UNC 5221 and Silk Typhoon, which are groups that we've talked about before. They've been inside compromised environments since mid 2024, roughly 18 months of access before public disclosure. The web shell they deployed is called Slaystyle. From there, they installed Brickstorm, which is a Go and Rust based backdoor that communicates over WebSockets. Later, they upgraded to Grimbolt, a C Sharp backdoor compiled with .NET native AOT and packed with UPX to make detection harder. But here's the part that had me doing a double take. Mandiant documented a technique they're calling ghost NICs, or network interface controllers. What UNC 6201 did was create temporary virtual network interfaces on ESXi virtual machines. Then use those interfaces to move laterally into internal networks and SaaS environments, and then delete the interface when they were done. The network adapters existed just long enough to route traffic and then vanished. Mandy and CTO described their team as chasing network activity from IP addresses that no longer existed and were never documented. That's not normal. That's a pretty genuinely novel evasion technique. Now, they also implemented something called single packet authorization using IP tables, basically a port knocking system where traffic to port 443 is monitored for a specific hex string. If the knock matches, the source IP gets added to an allow list and the traffic is redirected to a hidden service on port 10443. And the kicker, the firewall rule expires after 300 seconds, 5 minutes. Then it's gone. There's no evidence it was ever there. This is some pretty epic, I mean, not for the good guys or not for the people defending, but this is some pretty epic techniques we're seeing. It's just interesting. CISA added this to the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog on February 18th with a 3-day remediation deadline, which tells you how serious they're taking this. Dell has released patches in RecoverPoint for VMs version 6.0.3.1 HF1. All versions from 5.3 SP2 through 6.0 SP3 P1 are affected. RecoverPoint Classic is not impacted. Now, Mandiant reports fewer than a dozen confirmed victims so far, but they've been pretty clear that the full scale is unknown. Targets are concentrated in North American legal, technology, SaaS, and manufacturing sectors. Given the sophistication of GhostNix and the SPA technique, it's worth knowing that compromised environments may not show obvious indicators. The whole point of these techniques is to leave no trace. Thus the name GhostNix. I know, I thought it was a cool name. All right, let's shift gears from infrastructure vulnerabilities to something that hits the AI space directly. And it's a story that has some genuinely uncomfortable implications for anyone building or using AI tools. So, on February 25th, Bloomberg published a report based on research from a security firm called Gambit Security. The findings: an unidentified hacker jailbroke Anthropic's Claude AI. Yeah, that Claude AI, made by the same company that built this tool and used it to orchestrate attacks against Mexican government agencies over the span of roughly a month. From December 2025 through January 2026, the results: over 150 gigabytes of data exfiltrated, including approximately 195 million identity records. That makes this one of the largest government data breaches in Latin American history. To give context, Claude Code is a command line AI coding assistant that can write, debug, and execute code, among other things. It's designed for developers to use as a productivity tool. What the attacker did was feed it over 1,000 prompts in Spanish, framing the request as legitimate bug bounty research. The props position the attacker as an elite penetration tester, conducting authorized security assessments. Now, Claude initially refused requests to delete logs and operate in stealth mode. The guardrails did what they were designed to do at first, but the attacker iteratively refined their prompts until they found ways around the safety boundaries. Once those boundaries were bypassed, Claude produced thousands of attack plans with ready to execute scripts. And when Claude eventually hit its limits, the attacker switched over to OpenAI's GPT 4.1 for lateral movement planning, credential organization, and evasion tactics. They even fed the compromised data back into GPT 4.1 for automated analysis and extraction. Now, the target spanned over 10 Mexican government institutions: the Federal Tax Authority, SAT, which is where 195 million taxpayer records come from; the National Electoral Institute, INE, with voter registration files; multiple state governments, including Jalisco, Michoacan, and Tamaulipas; Mexico's cities' civil registry and health systems; a Monterey water utility; financial institutions, and over 20 vulnerabilities were exploited across these targets. It's crazy. Now, I want to be transparent about the sourcing here because context matters. Gambit Security is a recently formed firm that emerged from stealth with $61 million in funding. They have a commercial interest in making AI security threats visible. Several Mexican government agencies have disputed the claims. Jalisco denied any breaches, and INE reported no unauthorized access. Bloomberg and other reputable outlets have independently reported on this, but the primary research still comes from a single vendor. What we do know for certain: Anthropic confirmed they banned the associated accounts and enhanced misuse detection in Claude Opus 4.6. OpenAI confirmed their system refused requests that violated usage policies. This is the second publicly disclosed case of Claude being used in attack operations. The first was back in November 2025 when a Chinese state sponsored group reportedly used Claude Code for tactical operations against 30 global targets. What this story tells us is, regardless of where the final facts land on the Mexican government's denials, is that AI guardrails are a speed bump, not a wall. Iterative prompt refinement can and does defeat safety boundaries. There's an entire subfield of research of jailbreaking prompts or jailbreak prompts. Now, it's something just to be very aware of. We're watching the offensive tooling landscape evolve in real time, and AI is now a force multiplier for both sides of the equation. All right, staying on the nation state theme for a moment more, the next story ties in with a theme we've been tracking for a while: North Korean cyber operations. And this one's technically fascinating. On February 27th, Zscaler's Threat Labs team published their findings on a campaign they're calling Ruby Jumper. The threat actor behind it is Apt37, also known as ScarCruft, Ricochet Kalima, or Ruby Sleep, depending on which vendor's naming conventions you prefer. This is a North Korean state-sponsored group attributed with high confidence. Their targets, no, their targets, South Korean government agencies, defense contractors, and critical infrastructure. To give context, an air gap network is one that physically is disconnected from the internet. It's the gold standard for protecting classified government systems, defense contractor data, SCADA, and industrial control systems. Anything where you absolutely cannot afford an internet connected breach. Now, the whole point is that there's no digital path in nor out. The only way to move data is through physical media. Think USB drives, external hard drives, tape, things like that. What ScarCruft did is build a six malware toolkit specifically designed to bridge that gap. Five of the six malware families have never been previously documented, and the centerpiece, they embedded an entire self contained Ruby programming runtime, a full language interpreter inside of their toolchain. That's pretty unusual to say the least. The infection starts the way a lot of North Korean campaigns do: a malicious Windows shortcut file, a link file, LNK, delivered via spear phishing. When you click it, a PowerShell script scans the directory, locates itself by file size, which is impressive, and carves embedded payloads from fixed byte offsets. That is an anti analysis technique that makes it harder for automated tools to extract the payloads. From there, the first backdoor, RESTleaf, establishes command and control through Zoho WorkDrive, a legitimate cloud service. Like, Zoho is just a legit company out there. Then, Snake installs the full Ruby runtime and sets up persistence through a scheduled task called Ruby Update Check that runs every 5 minutes. It replaces a legitimate Ruby gems file with a malicious version. And here's where the air gap magic happens. A component called ThumbsBD, disguised as a Ruby ASCII library, acts as a bidirectional covert relay. It monitors for USB drives with at least 2 gigs of free space, creates hidden directories on them, and then uses those drives to shuttle data and commands between internet connected machines and air gapped systems. Then, Virus Task weaponizes the removable drives by hiding legitimate files and replaces them with malicious shortcuts. When someone plugs that USB into an air gapped machine and clicks what looks like their normal file, the payload executes. Now, there's also Footwine, an encrypted Windows spyware package disguised as an Android APK file. It does key logging, screenshots, audio and video recording, file manipulation, registry access, and even gives a remote shell, the full surveillance suite. Finally, Blue Light, which is a known ScarCruft backdoor that has been documented since 2021. This one uses Google Drive, OneDrive, pCloud, and Backblaze for command and control. The attribution is high confidence based on blue light reuse. The characteristic link or LNK attack vector, the two-stage shellcode delivery patterns, and C2 infrastructure fingerprints, along with decoy documents that match North Korean state media narratives. The thing that makes this campaign significant is the evolution in air gap bridging tradecraft. They are pairing cloud based command and controls with removable media relay, all powered by a portable Ruby runtime. Okay, something I forgot to mention for my non developers out there: a runtime is the thing you need on a machine to run a certain kind of language. It's just something to translate this language to something else. Now, this represents a meaningful step forward in how nation states approach the problem of exfiltrating data from the most protected networks on the planet. It is next gen stuff. Let's go ahead and close out the episode with this last story that I think directly affects more people listening to this show than any of the other stories today. This one isn't a specific vulnerability or a nation state campaign. It's about the industrialization of phishing at a level that makes multi factor authentication functionally obsolete against targeted attacks. Over the last couple of weeks, Krebs on Security, Abnormal AI, and Dark Reading have published detailed profiles of a platform called Starkiller. It is a commercial grade phishing as a service operation run by a threat group called Jinkusu. And I want you to understand what commercial grade means here. This is a full software as a service or SaaS business with subscription pricing, monthly software updates, customer service and customer support via Telegram, and a community forum. Now, we have seen ransomware as a service and other things before, but this is specifically phishing as a service. And it's just crazy the way this is developing. To give more context, phishing as a service, or PhaaS, is exactly what it sounds like. It's a subscription service where aspiring cybercriminals pay a fee and get access to a turnkey phishing platform. They don't need to know how to code, they don't need to set up infrastructure, and they don't need any technical skills. It's point and click fraud. We've talked about ransomware as a service before, and this is just another part of this evolving ecosystem where you have more technical cyber criminals giving less technical cyber criminals tools. What makes Starkiller different from phishing kits of the past is the technical approach. Traditional phishing creates a static copy of a login page, a fake that looks like the real thing. Security tools have gotten very good at detecting those. Starkiller doesn't clone anything. What it does is launches a headless Chrome browser inside a Docker container that loads the actual legitimate login page in real time. It acts as a man in the middle reverse proxy between the victim and the real service. So when a target clicks a Starkiller phishing link and enters their credential and their MFA code, whether that's a TOTP code from an authenticator app, an SMS code, or even a push notification. All of that gets forwarded in real time to the legitimate service through the proxy. The victim has a completely normal login experience. They're actually logging into the real site. But simultaneously, the attacker is capturing credentials, the session tokens, and the authentication cookies. They can take over the session directly. This is next level because we're no longer trying to fake someone into entering credentials into a fake website. They're actually having the user log into the actual website in a way that they can just sniff everything. This is why traditional phishing defenses fail against this approach, though. There are no static pages to fingerprint. There are no template files to match against a known database. The phishing page is the real page as far as any external analysis can tell. Domain block listing and even email link analysis just become much less effective. The platforms target Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, PayPal, and major banking institutions. It includes live session monitoring, key logging, cookie theft, geo tracking, automated Telegram alerts when a victim interacts. I mean, you're getting a bot to talk to you when one of your victims falls for it. They also get a SaaS analytics dashboard complete with conversion rates and performance graphs. It even has financial fraud modules for credit cards, crypto wallet seats, and bank credentials. The operator claims a 99.7% success rate, and they protect their own operator login with TOTP two factor authentication, which tells you they understand exactly how effective this is. They have a better customer dashboard experience than some of these MVP companies that are popping out because of AI wrappers, and that's insane. Now, what actually works against this? Here's what the industry is saying. The only MFA method that is truly phishing resistant is FIDO2 and passkeys. We're talking hardware bound credentials that can't be proxied because the authentication is tied to the legitimate domain cryptographically. TOTP, SMS, and push based MFA, the kinds most of us use every day, are no longer considered strong protections against targeted phishing. Beyond that, behavioral analysis for unusual login patterns, password managers that only autofill on the correct domain, and identity aware security solutions that look at the full context of a login attempt are all things worth considering. What this really represents is a dramatic lowering of the barrier for sophisticated account takeover. Any actor with a subscription fee can now bypass MFA across most of the services we use every day. That's a significant shift in the phishing landscape, and it's something to be aware of. Now, to just kind of do a wrap up for everything today, because I know this was a lot, I want to bring it together with just key takeaways from the episode. Number one is we had two CVSS 10.0 vulnerabilities in a single news cycle: Cisco SD-WAN and Dell RecoverPoint, both exploited by state sponsored actors for extended periods before anyone knew. The common thread is that infrastructure we trust to be secure by default, network controllers, disaster recovery applications, can harbor critical flaws for years. Patch availability doesn't help if nobody's deploying them, so update your stuff. Number two is novel evasion techniques are raising the bar. Ghost nicks that create and delete virtual network interfaces to leave no trace, single packet authorization with self expiring firewall rules, deliberate version downgrades to exploit older bugs and then restoring the original. Attackers are investing heavily in operational security, and defenders need to be aware that absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Now, number three, AI is now a weapon on both sides. Whether it's a hacker jailbreaking Claude to generate attack scripts against government infrastructure, ScarCruft building modular malware toolkits, the AI transformation of cybersecurity is accelerating. AI guardrails are a speed bump, not a wall. Number four, air gap networks are not impenetrable. ScarCruft's Ruby Jumper campaign demonstrates that with the sufficient investment and a portable runtime, the air gap can be bridged through everyday removable media. Organizations relying on air gaps as a primary defense layer may want to look into behavioral monitoring and anomaly detection for USB activity. And number five, multi factor authentication, as we know it, is under serious pressure. Starkiller's real time proxy approach makes TOTP, SMS, and push based MFA far less effective against targeted phishing. FIDO2 and passkeys are where the industry is headed for phishing resistant authentication. That's worth considering for your own accounts, and it's worth raising with your security team for organizational deployments. The through line across all of these five stories: security is the person plus the technology. Even the most isolated networks depend on people being aware of what's happening and making informed decisions. That is what this show is about. I want to bring more info to you guys. But with that said, I want to thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Whether you listen to the whole thing, start to finish, or you jump to the story that caught your eye, I appreciate you being here. If any of these stories gave you that, oh, I need to tell somebody about this feeling, please do. Share the episode with a colleague, a friend, your IT team, whoever you think would benefit from hearing it. A share, a subscribe, a review. Those are the things that help the show reach the people who need this information. And as always, that subscribe button on YouTube and on your podcast app of choice, it really does make a difference. We're all in this together. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and update your stuff. I'll catch you in the next one.